This is my first proper review of a game, so forgive me if it's not of the highest quality. So to give some background, I'm a long-time fan of the Dark Souls series. I've played Demon Souls, Dark Souls 1, 2, 3, Bloodborne and Sekiro. And I've played all of them multiple times. And I'll be honest, I kind of didn't love Dark Souls on my first playthrough. There are some very punishing systems in the game, and the lack of quality of life improvements compared to Dark Souls 3, which I played first, was very apparent and made me salty at times. And the game is hard. Sure, for veterans it's one of the easiest Souls games to break, with things like magic and pyromancies, but you want to know about those things when you're first playing the game. So let's start at the beginning. The Undead Asylum is a good intro to the game. In this tiny area, it still manages to show you what the game is all about. Good level design capped off with a boss fight. And the boss fight is kinda whatever. The bosses in general aren't great in this game, at least mechanically. But they do have very cool designs, and for the most part every boss is different from the last one. They're memorable encounters, all of them, except for the stray demons that are just rehashed asylum demons. But most bosses are also very rich in lore. I don't really know the lore too well in this game, so I won't talk too much about it. But I like that the bosses aren't just there to be an obstacle without any backstory whatsoever. No, even Pinwheel has a lot more to him than that. I mean, he's not really an obstacle anyway. But after the asylum you're introduced to the true star of the game, the world. And this is where many players will drop the game. Because you have three directions to go to. You can either take the seemingly most obvious path to the graveyard, but if you try attacking the skeletons, you'll quickly realize your damage is pathetic, and theirs isn't. At this point you should turn back, but not everyone does. Some people after hearing that the game is hard just assume that yeah, this is intended. I can't blame them, people do overhype the difficulty a little bit. The other path leads you to New Londo Ruins, which is an even worse direction to take. Here you can't even do damage to the enemies unless you have Transient Curse. So ignore that path as well. You're actually supposed to go up here and to Undead Berg, where enemies can be killed typically in 1 to 2 hits. In most cases the combat in this game is this: hit your opponent before they hit you. There are some beefier enemies in which case you have to find an opening to punish their attacks, but otherwise focus on dodging. I also think the enemy variety and design is good in this game. Most enemies are slow, just like you are, and this makes it fair. And I love how many different weapons there are in this game. Now, the weapons themselves are very limited with their movesets. But again, there's so many options here, I don't mind it. However, there is one big problem with the combat. The lack of omnidirectional rolling when locked onto a target. It's gotten me killed so many times in this game. They had the chance to fix this with the remaster, but sadly they didn't. Still, you can fight without locking on, so it won't always be a problem. There's also the healing system that I like quite a bit. Normally you have 5 Estus, but if you use Humanity at a bonfire, you can increase it up to 10 at the start of the game. I think 20 is a bit too much in the late game though. And you can use Humanity to heal yourself too, but they're a limited resource, so I rarely did. But if you farm them, you could use them pretty much infinitely. But other than that, I think it's a good healing system. But yeah, anyway, the multiple paths choice doesn't really matter on your first playthrough, as you can really only use one of them. But I still like that the game isn't starting off linear. No, you're dropped into a world with multiple paths to take, even if some of them you can't use yet. It's kind of like a Metroidvania. But Undead Berg is great. I think it's a very good first true level. There's lots to explore, lots of hidden loot and such. And you have a great incentive to find loot because the game is hard, so you want to find every advantage you can get. Eventually you encounter Taurus Demon, the second boss in the game. If you remember what the Asylum Demon taught you, you would try to use a plunge attack on it. And I like that you are rewarded for remembering that. But the plunge attack tactic never really shows up again after that, which is kinda weird. Then you encounter the first and probably the most bullshit part of this game in my opinion, and it's the Hellkite Dragon. There is a tiny bit of warning about the danger ahead, with the ground being scorched, but there is so little time to actually react to it. Once you've triggered the dragon to appear, there's barely any time to escape. Then you do a bunch more levels, and you could do them in multiple different orders. You could do Undead Parish next, or the Darkroot Garden. Then from Darkroot Garden you could go to Blighttown with the Master Key, or you could go through the depths. There's lots of options here, and it's what I love about this game. And these areas for the most part are good. I like Darkroot Garden, I like the depths, and I don't even hate Blighttown. I don't think it's fun, but it's pretty well designed. Then you eventually come across the part of the game I found the most infuriating on my first playthrough. Sen's Fortress. This place is just cruel, and I kind of love it now. The traps aren't really bullshit, you just need to be patient and pay attention. Through Sen's Fortress you reach the peak of the game for many, Anor Londo. This place is stunning compared to pretty much everything else you've seen before. Even though the game is kind of outdated graphically, even with the remaster, the details in the environments are great. Gameplay wise, I don't think Anor Londo is amazing, but the contrast is what makes it stand out so much. You've been through hell in Sen's Fortress, you've seen all manner of disgusting shit in Blighttown and the depths, but now you're in this grand, clean city. It also has the best main game boss in my opinion, Ornstein and Smough. I really enjoyed this fight. But after Anor Londo, things start to take a turn for the worse. You have areas like Tomb of the Giants, New Londo Ruins, Crystal Cave, Demon Ruins and Lost Izalith. I kind of like Duke's Archives and I don't hate the Catacombs, but Demon Ruins plus Lost Izalith is probably one of the lowest lows in the Souls franchise. The enemies are reused bosses. The bosses themselves are terrible for the most part, featuring some of the most hated fights, such as Bed of Chaos and Centipede Demon. I'm pretty sure they just ran out of time or resources or both, and these areas were left pretty unfinished. You can tell from just playing them. If they had more time to develop the game, I can't even imagine how good it could have been. But one thing I do like about the second half of the game is how many options you still have. You can tackle the areas in whatever order you want. And while some people complain about the sudden access to teleporting from bonfire to another, I think it's necessary with how big the world has become. I would not want to travel all the way from Anor Londo to New Londo Ruins on foot. It would be too long of a trip. The game finishes off with a neat looking short level, Kiln of the First Flame. I don't like the final boss, but the set piece was nice, as was the music and the atmosphere. But I should also mention the DLC, which in my opinion makes the second half of the game a lot better. The level design isn't improved by much, but the bosses for sure are. It starts off with a pretty good boss, Sanctuary Guardian. Then next is Artorias, my favorite boss in the game. Then there's Calamite, another good boss, and Menace, my second favorite boss. The areas themselves are fine too, and I especially love Ulasil Township, mostly for the atmosphere. There's also PvP in this game, which I've had very little experience with. I've heard very mixed feelings about it. It seems to be very much about just trying to backstab the opponent, so it's probably not great, but I don't really care because it's not what I want from this game anyway. So how would I describe Dark Souls overall? Well, it's a flawed masterpiece like so many others before me have stated. Its world design is its strongest aspect. The music is pretty good, but not something I would listen to. The second half of the game isn't as strong as the first, but the atmosphere is wonderful all throughout. The bosses are okay for the most part, and I just love playing this game. It just feels really smooth. It's not exactly a clunky game, so if I had to give this game a score, it would probably be a 9 out of 10. And that's it for my first ever game review. Let me know what you think. Was it good? Was it bad? Was it something in between? Let me know what I could have done better, and if I make another one, I'll try to improve upon it. Anyway, thanks for watching. See ya.